Rhythm changes is a chord progression that mystifies many players, and what we're going to take a look at today is an approach of looking at it using only guide tones, the thirds and sevenths of the chord. We're going to use that to play chords, to comp through it, and also to understand melodic choices for linear playing, to build solos from, outlining the harmony without playing arpeggios or having it sound like a scale exercise or leaning too heavily on just major or minor pentatonics and just playing blues over everything. So we're going to start really simple with a diatonic approach and then start introducing substitutions and using the substitution guide tones. This gets you into the chord and gets you playing the harmony in a more surgical way that sounds like you really know what you're doing and you're outlining the changes at all times. Check it out. The first thing you need to know before even getting into the guide tones is the chord changes. So you got to know the form by heart. Let's go over it once just to clear up the air. So if we're thinking about B flat, which is the key that most rhythm changes are in, it's a 1, 6, 2, 5 twice, right? That's the beginning of the A section. So a 1, 6, 2, 5 is B flat major 7, going to G minor 7, going to C minor 7, going to F7. The first layer of complexity, we're just going to talk about the diatonic version of this tune. So as simply harmonically as we can possibly play it. So we have B flat major 7, G minor 7, C minor 7, F7. So all the chords here appear inside the key of B flat. We're not using any secondary dominants, any substitutions. The next 4 bars are gonna be a 2, 5 to E flat. So we are leaving just one major scale. We're basically going into the major scale of the 4 chord. We are modulating for a second. So what we're doing now is we're gonna play an F minor 7 for 2 beats, B flat 7 for 2 beats, and then we're going to go to E flat major 7 for a whole measure, right? That's the most basic way to play a rhythm changes. The very ending of it typically would be another 1, 6, 2, 5. So let me just play a whole A section real quick. 1, 6, 2, 5. 1, 6, 2, 5. 2, 5 of the 4 chord, 4, and then I'm going to play another 1, 6, 2, 5. That last 1, 6, 2, 5, people typically throw in a substitution for the 1 chord there and make it into a 3, 6, 2, 5. So D minor, G minor, C minor, F7. Cool, still all diatonic. Now let's start digging into those guide tones. I'm trying to see the thirds and sevenths of each one of these chords. Maybe just grab the thirds and sevenths and the root just to make it easy at the beginning, and we're only going to take a look at the D and G string for the guide tones for the whole video, just to clear it up. Later you can transpose it really easily into other strings. If I take a look at, let's say, this B flat major 7, and you want to see that chord on the next set of strings, all you do is you take the bottom note in the guide tone, this is a B flat with its 7th and 3rd, and you move the 7th just up an octave to the B string. So you have the shape right there. But for now, just so we don't spend the whole time checking out different locations on the fretboard and focus on the concept. We are just going to learn it on this set of strings. So let's start moving these chords around. The first thing you want to see is going from the 1 to the 6 minor chord. So here is B flat major 7. And now I'm going to move it to a G minor. I have two options of where I can move those notes. I can go down to this G minor, or I can go up to this G minor. I typically will go up because this is a really close voice leading moving up and a really far voice leading moving down. You see, to get the voices down to the guide tones of that G minor, I have to go a major third down with both notes. But here, one voice needs to move a half step up and the other one needs to move a minor third up. So you want to keep it as close as possible because we're going for smooth voice leading. So I have this 4th moving to this 5th, but I'm seeing it just as grips with these shell chords, shell voicings. Now what I'm going to do from this point is play a C minor 7 and an F7. So check out the motion in terms of the D and G string I have. That's my diatonic 1-6-2-5. Now there's one other place I could play that on the neck. If I go down here, this is a B flat, 3rd and major 7. Just an inversion of that 4th gives me this 5th. Now if I just use that shape and then go from here to that G minor, C minor, F7. If you don't want to have an open string, you can play it up here. Now I can build lines from just that, and that gives you that Charlie Parker, like old pop kind of sound. I'm just adding some approach notes and see what I can have. Like, it's great music, right? Like, this is the stuff that needs to be in the center of your lines if you're trying to play this style. So just working on those sounds and seeing them against the bass notes really gets you in the ballpark. Also, if you're just comping, this is a great way, especially if you're playing like a real fast rhythm changes. These 2-note grips just have the whole sound in them. This happens twice. Now let's take a look at the 2-5 to the 4 chord. You have 2, which is F minor, right? We're talking about the 5 of 4. It's the 2-5 leading to E flat. Then B flat 7 is right here. And then E flat major 7 is right there. So 2, 5, 1 into the 4 chord. And then I'm just going to keep that sound for the whole measure. This is the simplest way to play a rhythm changes. It's not what I actually would do when I'm playing it. Nobody really plays it that simple, but you can have that. And then we said we're going to go into a 3-6-2-5 instead of a 1-6-2-5. So here's D minor. It's flatted 7 and it's minor 3rd. And then we're going to go to a G minor. We're still not introducing secondary dominance. Everything here is diatonic. So that's D minor, G minor guide tone, C minor 7, F7. So let's play the entire A section. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty cool. Now the second A is identical, but at measure 7 and 8 of that 8-bar phrase, instead of going 3-6-2-5, you just go 2-5-1. So that thing. So let me play the second A. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we move to the B section of a rhythm changes. 2 measures each. It's just a chain of dominant chords, but when you look at the guide tones, something is going to click, I promise you. So it's D7, which in the harmony is the 5 of 6, 2 measures. Going to G7, which is the 5 of 2. Going to C7, which is the 5 of 5. Going to F7, which is the 5 chord. But if I take a look at their guide tones, I have this tritone here, the 3rd and flatted 7th of this D. And all I'm seeing is that moving down in half steps. Now if I'm using this location for the guide tone line, then it resolves beautifully into this B flat. The guide tones of B flat here. But I can start the guide tone on the D7 up here, right? Same thing, it's just an inversion. Instead of 3rd and flatted 7th, now it's just flatted 7th and 3rd. When you have dominant chords, their guide tone lines form a tritone, and tritones are the only interval that inverts symmetrically, right? A 4th, when you invert it, becomes a 5th, but a tritone stays a tritone. So if I do it from here, here's my D7, G7, C7, just moving down in half steps, F7. Now I'm resolving beautifully into that B flat major 7. So now I'm going to play the whole form. It's going to be an A, A, B, A. That's the form for rhythm changes. And on the last A, I'm going to play the 3, 6, 2, 5, just like the first A. So it looks like this, just guide tones. 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do it in the other location up here. You can practice that going a 1, 2, 3, 4. That kind of thing. Here is building lines from this kind of idea. I'm going to slow it way down to where you can really hear it. A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. that kind of thing. If you're having a hard time following along, we have everything tabbed out and notated on our Patreon. The link is here, so be sure to join our Patreon family for this lesson and many others. So let's dig into the next level of complexity. What we're going to do now is we're going to introduce a secondary dominant instead of the second chord. So instead of G minor, we're gonna use G7. Now, you're gonna run into something that's a little bit tricky. The voice leading between 1 major 7 and that guide tone of the G7 is not as smooth. Why? Well, before I only needed to go a half step up to get the G minor and a minor third with the other voice, but now I have to go a whole step up and a minor third. It's not bad, you can practice doing this. Not a horrible sound. But there are better things to do. So what we tend to do is, instead of using the guide tones for the 1 chord, we use the guide tones for a substitution for the 1 chord. This might be overwhelming to some of you, but here's just a tidbit of knowledge that's gonna help out with that. When I'm replacing a chord with another chord, it needs to belong to the same function in terms of the diatonic chords that come out of the scale. Something you could just memorize is that the 1 chord, the relative minor, the 6 minor, or the 3 minor in a key are interchangeable. So if I'm in the key of B flat, I have 7 diatonic chords that come out of it. B flat major 7, C minor 7, D minor 7, E flat major 7, F7, I have G minor 7, A half diminished. The 1, 3 minor, and 6 minor are interchangeable. B flat major 7, D minor 7, and G minor 7. All I'm doing is I'm taking the guide tones of one of the other chords. So let's start by looking at the 3 minor. Here's that D minor. The F and the C are the flatted 3 and the flatted 7th of that D minor chord. Now I'm just looking at those 2 notes still on a B flat root. Right? I'm still thinking 1, 6, 2, 5, but now instead of this, I have this. You see how only 1 note is changing? That 4th becomes a tritone, right? That's D minor, G7, C minor, F7. Here it's this. Now that's really cozy when you're comping. It's just easy, you know, instead of like having these bouncing kind of motions, you have this. That kind of thing. It's just easy to play. Now the other option is going 6 minor. You see those flatted 7th and flatted 3rd of G minor? Now it goes here. So just 1 note is changing again, but now it's changing in a different direction. So we went from here to here. That's a nice solution too, right? G minor, G7, C minor, F7. Check it out linearly. I got. So we had 6 minor, 5 of 2, which is really 6 dominant, 2, 5, or we had 3 minor, 6 dominant, which is 5 of 2, 2, 5. So here's the 3, 6, 2, 5. Sweet line. And here's the other one, the 6, 6 dominant, 2, 5. All these lines come out of it that are awesome, super in the style. So this is pretty much as complex as the 1, 6, 2, 5 portion of this thing goes. The only thing you could do is turn the 2 minor chord into a 5 of 5. So check this out. Here's 3, 6, And then instead of a 2-5, I can just go. I'm not crazy about that sound. It makes it very happy, but it sounds like this. You hear people do that, Joe Pass, people like that, Oscar Peterson. So when you're building lines like... So that's an option. I'm not crazy about that one. So now let's try to play the whole progression while adding that tidbit of information. So here's the 3-6-2-5 portion. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the 6 dominant 2-5. 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's move on to the next level of complexity. What we're going to talk about now is measure 6. We sort of left the other half of measure 6 open. We didn't put another chord there, right? It's a 4-beat thing, 1 measure thing on just the 4 chord after the 2, 5 to E flat. That almost never happens in actual rhythm changes playing. People stuff that measure full of something. So you gotta know your options when you're talking about that measure. And there are lots of them. There's every variation under the sun. Let's start on measure 5 when we have that 2-5 moving into it, right? Here's the guide tone, F minor, B flat 7. By the way, some people skip the F minor and just play that tritone, the B flat 7 for the whole measure. I guess that would be a simpler way of doing it. But I'm not crazy about that sound. I like it 2-5. We land on that E flat major 7. The next chord could be a lot of things. In bebop, what you hear most of the time is an E diminished, sharp 4 diminished. So what are the guide tones for a diminished chord? You go from here to this tritone. Now, what's the logic there? Okay, well, this is the flatted third of E, and this is the double flatted 7. But really, if you think about where that comes from harmonically, it's almost like an A7. And this is the guide tone for an A7 chord. Why an A7? Well, that leads me really nicely into the 3 chord, right? It's the 5 of 3. So I have this 2-5 to the 4, 4 major 7, A7, D minor, G7. So the line is super voice-led if I use that little tritone there. It goes. See how it's just, the cycle is really complete. So I'm thinking about that as like, linearly, it's beautiful. From the top, 1, 2, 3, 4. Makes so much sense. So that guide tone creates this long chain of 2 5s, really. It's kind of like a... And you can do it up on the other location on the neck, right? You have this F minor, B flat 7, this E flat going to this E diminished, right? So just extending that chain. It's pretty cool. So that's option number 1. Let's take a look at something else people do. What you see a lot of time is people playing 4 minor 7. So what happens when you do that? Now you have a chromatic move. This 4 major 7 going to this 4 minor 7. So that's a less voice-led option. It's more chromatic sounding, because from there you go to this 3 minor. So what have you created? You have this motion. So that's sort of the Charlie Parker kind of sound. You have a lot of that in the music. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, top. Hear that sound? It's awesome, right? Really cool option. Now, here's another thing people do. Instead of playing that E flat minor, they think about A flat 7. It's relative 5 chord. So now I have this tritone. So I'm going from here to here, which is more voice-led going into that 3 minor chord because that note is already there. So it's a little bit less chromatic sounding than that E flat minor, the A flat 7. So check this out in context. Comping first. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pretty awesome. There's one more option that people do, which is playing E flat minor major 7. What's that, right? So here's my guide tone for that. E flat with a minor 3rd and a major 7. Where does that come from? Just from here. So in a way, it's more voice-led because you only hear that 3rd changing. So in context, that's 3, 6, 2, 5, 3, 6, 2, 5, 2, 5. Linearly, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Sweet sound. I think that's pretty much all of the things that people do in that spot. So just to recap, what can you do on measure 6? You can go from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, and from here to here. All of these are solid options. They just imply different harmonies that connect to that 3, 6, 2, 5 at the end. So that's very cool. Those are the options for measure 6. There's one more option that's even cooler that we're going to touch on later in section 3. But for now, you should check these ones out. If you're having a hard time following along, and I know this is a lot of information, we have all the shapes, all the tabs available for you on our Patreon. Be sure to check it out. There's so much great information there. And we're going to just talk about one more level of complexity in this video. So now we're going to go into the beat. And all we're going to do now is add relative 2 chords to the 5 chord. Let's say I don't want to hang out on this for 2 measures. What can I do? Well, this is a D7. its relative 2 chord is A minor. So I can use the guide tones for that A minor. I can go. Now I can do the same thing for the next chord. Instead of going to G7, I can go D minor, G7, G minor, C7, C minor, F7, right? So it's adding suspensions to where you're not giving out the whole guide tone immediately. There's something a little more gradual happening. And when you're listening to like a guy like Charlie Parker, something that you're really hearing is that kind of use of 2/5s, relative 2 chords. So instead of hearing something like this, you have a sound that's a little bit more detailed with each measure. A 1, 2, 3, 4. So now let's recap the whole thing with guide tones, moving through the form using the 2/5s on the bridge and using, let's say, 4 minor 7 on the other half of measure 6. A 1, 2, a 1, 2, 3, 4. That kind of thing. The last thing we're going to talk about, again for measure 6, is something that you can do to make it even less predictable. Instead of going to a major 7 chord there, you can just go straight to a minor 7 chord and then play a 2/5. So then you're really changing the voice leading because you're creating this chain of dominance that's skipping 1. So what am I doing? I'm going from the top of the form. 3, 6, 2, 5. 3, 6, 2, 5. Now I'm going to go 2, 5, 1 to the 4. But when I get to the 4, I'm going to go straight to 4 minor. And the first chord, I can either use a minor major 7 or a minor 7. If it's minor major 7, then they're both coming from the same scale, which is melodic minor. But I can go minor 7 there too. So that sounds like this. A 1, 2, 3, 4. Be sure to leave a comment. At the 50th comment, we'll select somebody from the comment section to give out the Patreon tabs for free. So type away. All right, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube, sign up for our Patreon. I hope you enjoyed these lessons, and we'll see you next time.